Good morning and welcome to the third in the series of the This Can Happen webinars. So we're aiming to support you, your colleagues and your families with a series of webinars at this time. So my name is Susie and I will be facilitating the session today. So before we start, I'm just going to quickly run through how this webinar will work for those who haven't participated before. So our speaker, Sarah, will talk to you for about 50 minutes and you'll be able to follow along on your screen, and then we'll move on to questions at the end. We will be sending you the slides and a recording of the session afterwards via email, so don't worry if there's anything that you don't quite catch. I know that we're all at home and have our, we're reliant on our own IT systems and might have family around, so you will get this tomorrow as you experience it today, if you see what I mean. So you can ask a question at any time during the session. We really do encourage you to do so. The more interactive, the better. All you need to do is type it into the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. Questions are totally anonymous and only come to my screen. So please do feel to contribute in complete confidence. As I say, I'll then read out the questions at the end. Okay, so yeah, that's enough from me. So it now gives me great pleasure to hand you over to your guest speaker today, Sarah Steele.
Thanks very much, Susie. Good morning, everybody. Well, look, before the coronavirus, 60% of us were worried about money. And sadly, that percentage is rising as we see financial worries and uncertainty increase. This can affect our well-being and our ability to cope day to day. So the aim of the session is to give you some practical guidance and pointers as to the financial help available to you at time to reduce that stress. So over the next half an hour or so, we're going to look at both your rights as an employee or if you're self-employed and the benefits available to you. Then we're going to go on to look at what help's available in relation to debt, your mortgages, savings, insurances, and then we're going to finish off with some general tips that might help you and your family to save money at this time. Right, so let's start by looking at our rights. Now, we're all aware that current government advice is for us to stay at home unless we're going out for food, health reasons, or to work, where we can't do this from home. So I'm going to start by looking at the support in place if you are an employee. Now, employers have been instructed to support you in sticking to that government advice, including allowing you to work more flexibly. Now, you most likely fall into one of these 6 categories shown on the screen, and we're going to talk through briefly what each of those means. So first of all, you might be an employee that is just working from home. You're able to do that. If that is the case, your employer should be paying you as normal. You should continue to receive the benefits and the pension contributions that you're used to. But they should also be keeping in regular contact, seeing how they might be able to improve your working from home arrangements, considering your needs and seeing what tasks you can do reasonably from home. And they should also be checking in regarding your health and well-being. I know many companies have set up Zoom, Microsoft Teams meetings, amongst other things, to keep in contact and to continue things like team meetings for morale. I think it's fair to say that we're all learning as we go on this one. So unless you were all ready to set up to work from home, just keep talking to your employer. Try to resolve any issues as you go. And it is worth getting a written record of any arrangements that you come to so that you have got clarity on both sides. Now, the next category is vulnerable or high risk, and you're going to fall into this if you've got a long-term health condition such as asthma, diabetes or heart disease, or maybe you're taking medicine that weakens your immune system. If this is the case, you will have received a shielding letter from the NHS asking that you stay at home and that you avoid all face-to-face contact for at least 12 weeks. And this is to protect you from coming into contact with the virus. Now, if you fall into this category and you can continue to work from home, then you can do that, and your employer should continue to pay you as normal and to give you the benefits. However, if you're unable to work from home, then you should either be furloughed, or if you're ill and you have any symptoms, then you will be eligible for sick pay. And I'm going to talk through furloughed employees and sick pay in a moment. The next box is those that are self-isolating, and you're going to be required to do this if you or someone in your house has got the coronavirus or the symptoms, or that you've been told to self-isolate by a doctor or the NHS. Now, any employee that needs to self-isolate that would normally earn more than £118 a week, so that's around £6,000 a year, is going to be eligible for statutory sick pay. Now, statutory sick pay is around £95 a week, and it will be paid from day one of sickness up to 28 weeks. Now, some employers will pay more than this. That's known as contractual sick pay, and that will be outlined in your contract of employment and absence policy if it applies to you. If you don't qualify for the sick pay because you don't earn enough, then you will be able to apply for universal credit. And again, I'm going to be going through the benefits in a moment once I've gone through the employee rights and the self-employed rights. So the next category is the furloughed employee. Now, if you're an employee that you can't work because you are high risk vulnerable category, or you're looking after your children, or you've got no work that you can do from home, employers can put you on furlough. So that means on hold for a minimum of 3 weeks. In this instance, the government is going to be subsidising 80% of your salary up to £2,500 a month, plus any minimum pension contributions that you're eligible for. And this is going to be backdated to the 1st of March. So if you fall into this category, that's what you should be getting, 80% of your salary, up to £2,500 a month. But employers are free to pay that difference between the furlough amount and the full salary if they're able to do so, but they don't have to. If you receive furlough pay, you'll still need to pay tax and NI on those earnings, and you'll still have entitlement to the statutory sick pay, maternity pay, redundancy pay whilst you're receiving those earnings. And your holiday entitlement will also accrue as normal. Now, your employer will tell you if you're furloughed, and they'll let you know what that means for you. If you're still in your probationary period, you can still be furloughed, but your employer is likely to extend your probationary period until you can return to work and complete that. Now, if you're furloughed and you're not a vulnerable individual, you are allowed to volunteer as long as you're not adding any value to your employer while you're receiving those furloughed earnings. So, for example, if you're a lawyer, you may be able to volunteer in law centres and offer pro bono help during that time, as long as it's not for your employer. Now, if you're somebody that's been let go from your employer as a result of the coronavirus, your employer is entitled to take you back on and reassign you as a furloughed worker. So contact them if that's the case for you. And just whilst we're talking about furloughing, the Treasury have also confirmed that if you are a limited company director, so even if you're the only employee of that limited company, you can furlough your income. Now, for a lot of people, this isn't likely to be huge, as most company directors earn more through dividends, and dividends aren't covered. But unfortunately, if you do that, if you do furlough your PAYE earnings, that does mean you can't work for the firm during that time, other than to file statutory legal documents. So in reality, that's unlikely to help many. Right, back to employees then. The 5th category there is if you're someone that needs to take time off work to look after someone, such as children who now can't go to school. In the past, you've always been entitled to take a reasonable amount off as unpaid leave to do that. And your employer could have also asked you to use any unused holiday to cover that absence. But the government has confirmed that if that applies to you now, you can be furloughed to look after someone. So again, get in touch with your employer if this applies to you and that isn't happening. If you need to look after somebody in your house because they've got coronavirus symptoms, then you'll fall under the self-isolating category and you could receive statutory sick pay as a minimum for that time. And just to note that self-isolation, if you're looking after somebody else with the illness, is up to 14 days. So the last category here, but certainly not the least, is the key worker. If you're a key worker, you will have been notified from your employer that that's the case. And this tends to be people working in health and social care, education, or key public services such as the Justice Service. So if you are a key worker, you will still need to go into work if you can't do it from home. If you're frightened to go to work because you're scared of catching the illness, your employer should listen to your concerns and take any steps to protect you. So, for example, if you normally work in an office and travel on public transport, perhaps they could provide a car parking space for you so that you don't need to use that transport. You can also arrange to take time off as holiday or unpaid leave if you don't want to work, but your employer does have to agree to this. So be careful. If you do refuse to attend work and you haven't already agreed that holiday or unpaid leave, it could result in disciplinary action. Now, if you're a key worker, you are entitled to send your children to school at this time, but the government's guidance is really clear that your child should be looked after at home if they can be. Now, this is always something that I've thought about. It's like, what age is it okay to leave your kids at home? So if you've got older children and you're thinking about leaving them, there is no law about what age you can leave your child on your own, but it is an offence to leave them if you think they're going to be at risk. So really it's a parental judgment as to how mature and capable your child is. I looked up the NSPCC guidelines, and they recommend that children under 12 are rarely mature enough to be left alone for a long period of time, and that children under 16 shouldn't be left alone overnight, and then babies and very young children should never be left alone. So that was a sort of a quick whiz through employees and what the rights might be. To finish that off, I just wanted to look at holiday pay because we've had lots of questions around that. So most of us, we're spending more time at home and not able to go on those holidays that we've booked. So what happens to our holiday entitlement? Well, the government's introduced a temporary new law to deal with that disruption. So you're now allowed to carry over up to 4 weeks paid holidays over a 2-year period if you can't take that holiday because either you're self-isolating or you're too sick to take that holiday, you've been put on furlough because you can't work from home, or at the other extreme, if you're a key worker, you're having to go into work and you can't take that time off. So in all of those cases, you can carry over up to 4 weeks. Now, if you leave your job in that 2-year period when you've carried over that holiday, any untaken paid holiday must be added to your final pay. Okay, with regards to bank holidays, if you can't take them off work this year because of the coronavirus, you should be able to take another holiday day later in your holiday year. But if that's not possible, again, you can roll those bank holidays into that rolled over holiday over the next 2 years. If you've previously got booked time off because you were due to go away over Easter, for example, and you no longer want to take that time off because your holiday has been cancelled, you can ask your employer to change the dates of that holiday, but they don't have to agree to that. They do have the right to enforce that holiday if they wish. Lastly, if your employer decides to close the workplace temporarily, they can ask you to take holiday for the time that it's closed. Now, if they do this, by law, they must give you twice as much notice as the number of days they want you to take off. So, for example, if they're going to close the office for a week, for 5 days, they need to tell you at least 10 days in advance. So that's a quick run through the employee rights. Let's look at self-employed individuals and what benefits are available to them, and then we'll go on to the state benefits that are applicable to both employed and self-employed. Okay, so if you're self-employed and you can continue to run your business from home, then that's great. However, if you are losing income due to the coronavirus, the government are providing help in the form of the new Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, or SISE. Now, to be eligible for that, more than 50% of your total income must come from self-employment, and you must have filed a tax return for 2018-2019, which means that you were self-employed before the 6th of April 2019. Now, if you haven't already submitted that tax return, you have got until the 23rd of April this month to do that so that you can access that scheme. The other thing is that your average trading profit over the last 3 years must be less than 50,000. So it can have been higher last year, but if it averages out with the previous years and it's under 50,000, you could be eligible. Now, if you do qualify, you'll get a non-repayable grant, which is going to be up to 80% of your profits, capped at £2,500 per month, but that income is taxable. Now, if you are eligible, you don't need to apply for this scheme. HMRC are going to be in touch because they've got all your records. They're going to know if it applies to you. This scheme is expected to start paying out in June, and the payments are likely to be backdated to cover March, April and May, and you'll get a lump sum for those. And the scheme could be extended if this lockdown continues too. Now, the difference here between the support for the self-employed rather than those employees that are furloughed is that if you're self-employed, you can keep working for yourself. But the government has asked that individuals do the right thing so that you only claim through this scheme if you're genuinely being adversely affected financially by the coronavirus and you need that financial support. As it's unlikely you're going to get any cash in your bank account until June at the earliest, the government has introduced that self-employed people will be able to defer their income tax payments, which were going to be due on the 31st of July, and you can defer them until January without any interest or penalty. And again, no applications needed for that. So potentially you could use any money you might have set aside for that July tax bill to cover any immediate expenses until your grant comes through in June. The other reason that the government has introduced is on VAT. So if you're a VAT registered self-employed sole trader, or you're a limited company, or you're a trade protection association, including chambers, you are eligible to defer VAT payments for 3 months. And again, this is automatic, no application is needed. But if you do choose to defer that VAT payment, you do need to still submit your VAT return as usual. But if you pay by direct debit, make sure that you cancel that with your bank in sufficient time so that HMRC don't attempt to collect that immediately on getting that VAT return. Now, if for any reason you're not eligible for the self-employed income support scheme and the tax and VAT deferment measurements don't go enough for you to cover you financially, or you need some money before the June payout, you can also try applying for the coronavirus business interruption loan. Now this scheme's been set up, it's open to all self-employed people and limited companies, and it offers access to loans, overdrafts and asset finance from all the major banks, and potentially you could get loans of up to £5 million over 6 years. The government could also give you a business interruption payment to cover the first 12 months of interest and the fees on those loans. So if you want some more info on any of the measures for self-employed, please look at the gov.uk website, which is given at the end of this presentation. And also it's worth knowing that HMRC have established a dedicated COVID-19 helpline to help businesses and self-employed individuals who are facing financial distress. And again, we'll put those details at the end. Okay, so whether you are employed or self-employed, there are some benefits that you might be eligible for at this time. I'll just run through those quickly. The first is universal credit. So this is designed to help with living costs and it's available to both employed and self-employed. Now, universal credit was brought in to replace the other state benefits, so that's the child tax credit, the housing benefit, income support, job seekers, employment support allowance, working tax credits. They decided to bring it all together under universal credit. And it's for people who are out of work or on low incomes, aged between 18 and the state pension age and living in the UK. Now, you won't be eligible for universal credit if you or your partner have savings of more than £16,000 between you. So since coronavirus, the government have increased that universal credit, the standard allowance. So to give you an idea of an amount, if you're single and you're over the age of 25 and you qualify, the standard allowance is about £410 a month. For a couple, that goes up to nearly £600 per month. And you could get more if you've got children, a health condition, or you're caring for a severely disabled person. You might also get more on universal credit for a housing allowance on top of that to cover rent and interest payments. And the amount you'll get will depend on the area you live in, and that's paid monthly. Now, universal credit could be reduced if you're already receiving other things such as job seekers allowance or you're getting furlough pay. If you think that you're eligible for universal credit, excuse me, you can apply online at the gov.uk website. And if your application is successful, you'll get the first payment after about 5 weeks. But a little word of caution here. Normally, the government get about 10,000 applications a day for universal credit. And at the moment, they're getting more than 100,000, so more than 10 times the amount. If you're self-employed and you are eligible for the self-employed income support scheme, but you want something to cover you to June, again, you may be able to apply for universal credit. And if you can't wait the 5 weeks for the payment, you can ask for an advance payment, but that will be deducted from future benefits. So that's universal credit. The other benefit that you might be eligible for if you are sick is the employment and support allowance. So if you're self-employed and you're not eligible for sick pay, or you're employed and you don't earn enough to get that statutory sick pay, you can apply for this if you're ill with coronavirus, if you're self-isolating because of the government advice, or you're caring for somebody who is ill with coronavirus. So the ESA is payable from day one, and you should receive payments 2 weeks after applying. The only thing is you cannot get the ESA at the same time as statutory sick pay, maternity pay, or job seekers allowance. To give you an idea of the amount that you'll get from ESA, again, if you're over 25, it's going to be about £74 a week. If you're under 25, that reduces to 58. But that could go up to about £140 a week if you can't work more than 16 hours because you've got a disability. So you can apply online for that as well at the gov.uk website. If you've lost your job and your employer won't take you back as as a furloughed employee, the last benefit, which I haven't mentioned here, but that's job seekers allowance. So to be eligible for job seekers allowance, you need to have worked as an employee in the last 2 to 3 years, over the age of 18, under state pension age, and not in full-time education, and available to work if you find some. Now that's around £75 a week, paid every 2 weeks up to 6 months. So that's a whistle-stop tour through Universal Credit, the Employment and Support Allowance, and Job Seekers Allowance. Now, what I'd recommend is if you think you're eligible for any of these, it is worth going on to the Money Saving Expert website, because on there they've got a 10-minute benefits calculator. If you put in your details, it'll tell you what you might be eligible for before you go into that queue of hundreds of thousands of pounds applying for this. Okay, the last thing I just wanted to touch on, because when I was researching for this, I found that whether you're employed or self-employed, you can claim tax relief for working at home on £6 of your earnings, and that's to really cover things like extra costs to you, like heating and electricity. And to simplify matters, HMRC have confirmed that from yesterday, the new tax year, you can claim up to £6 a week without providing any documentary evidence at all. So the way you do that, if you do self-assessment tax returns, you can go on to the using your home as an office section, and in there, in the amount paid by you, you put £6 in for every week that you've worked from home, and then that will calculate what's due back to you. If you don't do self-assessment, you can go on to your HMRC Government Gateway account online and fill in a P87 form, and that will do the same thing. You can claim more, but it will be much more labour intensive if you want to claim more, because you'll have to then start providing documentary evidence and providing bills and things like that. But I thought that was just a thought that I'd share with you, because I know not many people know about that. Okay, so that concludes the piece on employed and self-employed rights, and I'm going to take questions on that at the end. But now we'll go on to look at debt and savings and insurance, and we're going to start off with mortgages. Okay, so mortgages. If keeping up with your bills right now is a challenge, and you have got a mortgage to pay, many of the mortgage lenders are waiving interest fees for missed payments, and they're agreeing to reduce payments. And they can also allow you to take a mortgage or repayment holiday for up to 3 months, provided previously your payments were on time. All the major lenders are now doing that and allowing you to apply for those online. If you decide to do that, take a payment holiday, it's going to have one of 2 effects. So either your repayment period will be extended by the number of months that you miss, or when you start paying, the payment will be slightly higher to cover that break. Interest is still going to accrue during that time, but not making repayments might be a blessing for those of you whose incomes have dropped and you're struggling financially. So check with your provider to see what they're offering. Taking a payment holiday, importantly, is not going to affect your credit rating, as long as you've agreed that payment holiday up front with the lender and you don't cancel your direct debit. They will cancel the payment from their end, not from yours. If you're a private landlord, you're also now eligible for that 3-month buy-to-let mortgage payment holiday if your tenants are asking and if they're experiencing financial difficulties and can't pay the rent. So if you're renting and you're in need of help, speak to your landlord to see what they can do. Again, it isn't going to affect the landlord's credit rating to take that break on your behalf. The government have also introduced emergency legislation which says that all landlords in England and Wales will need to give 3 months notice before they start any eviction proceedings, and this is actually 6 months in Scotland. That's not going to affect any eviction proceedings that are underway though. If you still need help when this period's up, that 3-month mortgage holiday, just work with your landlord to see if you can establish an affordable repayment plan which takes your circumstances into account. On to home buyers. I've seen many for sale signs around here where everything's on hold. If you were planning to move house before the outbreak, lenders have agreed to help home buyers who have exchanged contracts and agreed completion dates. They're going to extend their mortgage offers by up to 3 months where that move's been impacted by coronavirus. The bad news for home buyers is that some lenders have started to withdraw many of the mortgages that were on offer, meaning that you are going to have less choice and it's going to make it harder for borrowers who have got lower deposits to get deals. A lot of this is just because the lenders aren't able to send people out to value the houses to assess the value of it. So just to give you an example, Halifax and Barclays have temporarily pulled any deals where people need more than 60% of loan to value for purchases and people remortgaging. However, it's not all doom and gloom. Some good news for those of you that have already got mortgages and are not moving. Because interest rates have been cut, existing mortgages are getting cheaper. So if you've got variable or tracker rates, your mortgage payments will be coming down at around £40 per month for every £100,000 that you've borrowed. Obviously, if you're on a fixed rate, there's going to be no change in that until the fixed rate is over. If you are out of your mortgage fixed period, you don't need more than 60% of your loan to value of your house, it might be worth shopping around now, see if you can lock in some new rates on the new fixed deals. Okay, so that's mortgages. Let's look at loans and debts. So if you've got a credit card that you can't pay off, try and move it fairly quickly to a 0% finance deal while you still can, as many of the credit card lenders are starting to reduce those offers, and we think they might go altogether as more and more people are going to need finance. Some credit cards are offering emergency credit limits, and the banks are being ordered to help those struggling to offer 3-month payment holidays on credit and store cards as well. It's likely these measures are going to come in from Thursday of this week, so do watch out for the news on that. The 3 major credit reference agencies, so that's Experian, Equifax and TransUnion, they've all confirmed that customers' credit scores are going to be protected if they get an agreed payment holiday in place. So this is called an emergency payment freeze. It's going to be invisible on your credit report, but it's not going to change anything that was on there before. So if you're up to date with payments before the payment holiday, you'll continue to be up to date all the way through. If you were already in arrears, your arrears will be kept at the same level. And the payment holiday won't count as more missed payments. So if you want a new card or you want to transfer a balance, it's best to do this online at the moment because their call centres are really busy focusing on their vulnerable customers. Okay, on to overdrafts. Now, this is a bit of a moving feast. If I'd spoken to you last week, I'd have said be really careful with overdrafts, as from yesterday, all banks were due to move from daily fees to a single interest rate. And the reason this got introduced was the hope that this would encourage fee competition between the banks. What actually happened in reality is that the competition didn't work, and most of the banks confirmed they were going to switch everyone to an interest rate of just under 40%, meaning that those who regularly have overdrafts of over £600 were going to be fairly severely affected and paying nearly double the charges. However, in light of coronavirus, the Financial Conduct Authority issued proposals suggesting that all banks should still offer the first £500 of overdraft for free, and that nobody should end up paying more fees just because they've switched from the old daily rates. This is the proposal that's going to be confirmed by Thursday. So again, keep an eye out for this. But in the meantime, watch out what your own banks are doing. I know that some of the banks had already started putting in measures. I know that HSBC were offering the first £300 for free. And I'd had a text from Barclays last week confirming they were going to waive all of the overdraft fees until the end of April. But please don't get yourself into trouble on those. The other thing I was going to mention was persistent debt. Now, you'll be classed as being in persistent debt if you've had a continuous debt for 3 years and you've only been paying the minimum each month. Quite a while ago, the FCA put out rules that said, all lenders must put a reasonable plan in place to help you to repay your balance. But if you ignored that offer, then they had the right to suspend or cancel your card. Now, those persistent debt rules have been relaxed. So if you're in long-term debt, you've now got until October to agree that repayment with your lender. So if you are in debt, try to shift your debt to more affordable options, such as moving your expensive overdraft to an interest-free credit card. And in these times of low interest rates, it's well worth using savings if you have them to pay off any debt. You're only going to be getting a maximum of 1.5% interest on your savings, but on your debt, you could be paying, 3 to 5% to transfer it to a 0% credit deal. You could be paying 20% on credit cards and up to 40% on overdrafts. So use your savings to pay off the debt to stop you from getting into more trouble. If you do manage to start paying off overdrafts or credit cards, try to reduce your limits as you go so they don't start to build up again. Now, if you are particularly worried about debt, there are quite a few debt advice charities who are going to be able to help you for free. And it doesn't matter if you're £100 in debt or hundreds of thousands of pounds in debt. These charities are here to help you. And I've listed the free ones here. You don't need to be a churchgoer to use the Community Money Advice or the Christians Against Poverty. So it's worth looking at all of them to see who can help you. The National Debt Line, for example, amongst some of the others, gives some useful sample letters on their website for writing to creditors. And Shelter is really a great resource if you're having problems with your rent or mortgage. And they can help you stop being turfed out of your home, even if you're about to go to court. So please contact them if you've got any issues at all. Okay, so that's debt. Let's turn to savings now. Interest rates on savings are actually holding up, or have been, surprisingly well since we've had the base rate cuts, but that's unlikely to last very long. So, try and lock in fixed savings deals while you can. Normally, if you've got a good deal on a savings plan in a fixed rate savings account, you normally have to pay a penalty to get it out before that fixed rate's up. But a lot of the major banks now are waiving those penalties so that if you have been affected and you need the money out, you can do that without affecting the rates. If you're looking for somewhere to save money at this time, I saw the other day that Marcus, which was the bank that was started up by Goldman Sachs, they're offering a 1-year savings deal at 1.45%, and they'll allow you to access that cash at the same time. So that's definitely worth looking at. Now, there are no changes planned to the current lifetime ISA rules. Lifetime ISAs are for people that want to save to purchase a home. If you decide to take money out of those, you will get the 25% penalty, which is the government bonus that goes into that. So if you can keep your money in there at the moment, try to do that. Right, let's look at ISAs and investments such as pensions as well. Now, they've been invested in equities, and as we know, the markets have fallen in reaction to the coronavirus, and I think the FTSE was down about 25% since February. So if you have got investments and are invested in stocks and shares, you will have seen that money fallen. If you're in a cash ISA, the value will have held up, but you may well get a lower interest rate in future, so watch out for that. Now, if I look back at the stock market crash of 2008, it took about 6 years for the markets to recover to all-time highs. And listening to the financial markets, some think it will take about the same time, others are thinking it's going to be a lot quicker than that. But we need to think about what that means for our investments. So if we look at pensions in particular, because this is normally some of the largest investments that people have. If you're lucky enough to be in a final salary pension scheme, or also called defined benefit pension scheme, your pension amount is protected, so you will not have seen any fall in the pension that's owed to you. However, if you've got a personal pension or a defined contribution pension, you may have seen that money fall if you're invested in equities. But please don't be alarmed, okay? These are intended to be long-term investments, and if you've still got a few years to retirement, the advice is do nothing, because the markets will recover and you'll see those savings grow again. If you've still got a way to go, it's also quite a good time to invest in those pensions, because you'll be buying units at a really low rate and that are cheap. So as the market recovers, your money will go up. If you're close to retirement, personal pensions and company pension schemes often have a default investment option in place, which automatically switches you out of those stocks and shares into less volatile, lower risk investments, such as cash and fixed interest, as you approach retirement age. So if this applies to you, you'd have been fairly protected from those falling markets. So again, do nothing at this time. Leave your money invested where it is. It's also worth mentioning that now is very unlikely to be a good time to transfer your pension or to take it out of your investments, because by transferring your pension, you'll normally exchange that investment for cash, which means that you'll be locking in those losses. And the same goes for switching from one investment to another. So it's really best to keep it invested as you were doing to ensure that you'll recover from that stock market recovery. If you do need help, say for example that you're approaching retirement and you're still invested in a high level of stocks and shares, there is the Pension Advisory Service, and this is sponsored by the DWP. It's got a helpline and their website's given at the end of this presentation. They can give you free help and advice on anything pension related, so please do use that service if you can. The last thing I just wanted to mention on pensions investments is be particularly careful at the moment, because they are being targeted by scammers. There have been common phishing emails going out, sending links to fake company websites. And basically they're saying, we can help you take your cash out now, we can help you protect it. Don't listen to them. The majority of them are hoaxes. So please be careful. Okay, so let's go on to insurances. The next thing that's been on people's mind is whether you're covered under insurance for the coronavirus type claims. And the answer to this really will depend on what type of insurance you have. If you've got life insurance or income protection insurance, they should cover coronavirus if you already had that policy in place. That's because these policies are normally based on declaring any existing conditions, but if you had the policy before coronavirus, you couldn't have quoted that. However, most income protection schemes do have a deferred period in place, so that's a period where you won't be paid, normally up to 4 weeks, so check your policy to see when that will start. It is still possible to take out a new life insurance or income protection policy to protect yourself now, but it's really likely you're going to be asked additional questions, such as whether you've tested positive for COVID-19, whether you've had any symptoms, or whether you've been told to self-isolate, and it could well be excluded if the answer to any of that is yes. Now, we now know that critical illness won't apply to coronavirus. So if you have that policy, you're not going to be covered for COVID-19 claims, as in itself, it isn't considered critical illness. However, if you then develop a serious illness as a result of the coronavirus, like the pneumonia, then that is considered to be a claim. In terms of getting accident, sickness and unemployment cover now, that is really tricky. Most insurers are not accepting new applications, or they're imposing additional exclusions, such as, you can't make any claims unless you've been employed for at least 2 months from the start date of the policy. The last one I wanted to mention is home insurance, because it used to be a requirement that you had to tell your insurer if you were using your house as a place of business. So the insurers have confirmed you don't need to do that now, unless you've brought home some specialist or expensive equipment from your work that you'll need covering. Now, if you're looking for a new policy, comparison websites such as Money Supermarket, Confused, Compare the Market, Go Compare, they can all be a really good start. Research by money saving experts actually shown that Money Supermarket on average gives the cheapest quote for the majority of people, so that could be a good place if you do want a new policy. However, it's worth remembering that Direct Line and Aviva don't quote on comparison websites, so it could be worth checking with them directly to see if they'll give better cover or price. Now, lastly, the Money Advice Service, which you'll see there, they've got some really good advice on their website about choosing the right policy for you, and their website is given at the bottom. Right, to finish off, before we take any questions that might be coming in, I just wanted to give you a few money saving top tips as to what's happening at the moment. So if like my husband, you got totally fed up with watching old FA Cup finals, Sky Sports have now confirmed that you can pause the membership for 3 months. And if you're watching Sky Sports through BT and Virgin, they've also added that option too, so you can cancel that. If you are a BT Sport customer, the last time I looked, they were given 1 month's credit, but you did have to ask them to give you that. Now, some of the mobile phone providers, I know Sky, Vodafone and Virgin, they're all giving data boosts and free calls. So just have a check, see what yours is doing. I use Tesco Mobile, and I know I got a text from EE saying that they're giving me unlimited calls between 8 o'clock at night and 8 o'clock in the morning. If you're struggling to pay energy bills, please be, don't worry too much. Your supplier's not going to be cut off. So disconnections of standard credit meetings, they've been completely suspended. And what's more, all the energy suppliers have actually agreed to provide support to anybody in financial distress. So that'll include debt repayments. So please contact them online if you're having problems. But I also know that some council tax areas are giving council tax holidays as well. In terms of your cars that are all sitting on your driveways, no doubt, if you've got an MOT due, all MOTs have now been extended for up to 6 months. You don't need to do anything to make that happen. The MOT will be extended automatically. However, you must keep your car in a safe, keep your vehicle safe to drive. So lights and brakes working, tyres within the worn limits, because if you are found with a car on the road that isn't safe to drive, you could be fined up to £2,500. So be very careful. All driving tests have unfortunately been postponed for 3 months, and theory tests are up to a month. However, if you are a key worker and you were due to take your test, they are running emergency tests for those. So you'll just need to check that you'll need to prove that you're a key worker, and you can get that booked in. If, like a lot of people over Easter, you had flights booked, you are legally entitled to cash refunds from flights, not just vouchers, but I know many of the airlines are trying to give vouchers in the first instance. Now, it might be worth taking those if you think you're going to reuse them, but if you want the cash, hold out for it. They will have to pay it sooner rather than later. The other thing is, if you've got train tickets, season tickets, all you need to do is go back to the people that you bought those season tickets from, and they'll refund you in full. I looked at gym memberships, and the majority of mainstream gyms have frozen memberships free of charge, and they're not going to be taking any further direct debit payments while the ban is in place and you can't go. So again, just double check with those, but most of them should have done that automatically for you. And one little one I've thrown in at the end, because it's a favourite in our household at the moment, is that Disney Plus have just launched their new streaming service on the 24th of March. That's basically got every Disney film and series you can possibly think of, going all the way back. I mean, we watched Herbie Goes Bananas the other night. They're offering a 7-day free trial, and after that it's $5.99 per month. So they're just a few tips, and I'll be updating that as I go. But if you are worried about anything we've spoken about today, if you're worried about your mental health, Mind is a really good charity that is offering support, and I've put their website there. They'll offer practical advice, and they'll help you with help us to how to cope staying at home. Okay, well that's I've sort of rattled through lots of different subjects there. Really anything that I thought that might help you during this time, but I'm really happy to take some questions if you have anything now.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That's been really, really helpful. I've had lots of comments saying how helpful your tips are and bits of information. So that is really great that you managed to help some people. Right, I'm just gonna go through some questions, if that's all right, obviously. Do charities have a different package to companies? I'm not sure if I'm going to be furloughed, and I didn't know if it was different being a charity than a business.
Oh, well, the reason I know this is I'm actually a trustee of a charity. No, charities can furlough employees in exactly the same way as employers can. So yes, if you can't work from home for your charity, then they should be furloughing you just like anybody else. Obviously, if you can work from home, then great.
Okay, thank you. Right, someone said, my partner's company decided to not furlough employees, but to lay off everyone. So they've got more flexibility around asking people to come back to work. And then they do not have to pay 80% upfront before they receive the money back from the government. Is there anything that can be done about this? The company does not do any critical work.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot actually, and I realise that it is the cash flow issue for a lot of companies. I mean, you are entitled to go back to that employer and ask them to furlough you. I mean, obviously, if they refuse, one of the first things I'd probably do is get on to Martin Lewis, because he is campaigning on behalf of those people that have been laid off who could be covered and be furloughed for that period of time. If you've been laid off and obviously you're then struggling for money, you can't wait to find out if you're going to be furloughed, please access the benefits on the gov.uk website. You might be eligible for that universal credit, you might be eligible for the job seekers allowance if you've been laid off.
Great, thank you. Are directors of your own company eligible for support?
So if you are a director of your own company, I think I mentioned, you could, if you wanted to, furlough your own PAYE money. But it's very unlikely you're going to want to do that, because you're probably taking more in dividends and you can't get that support. So if you are a director of the company, you can look for that business interruption loan, which is applying to the major banks if you're in financial distress. So that would probably be the first way to go if you didn't want to furlough your own salary, is to look for that loan. So again, everything's on the gov.uk website, which under coronavirus, and if you type it in, you'll get access to that.
Thank you. Someone here has asked, I think you might have answered this, so can you basically ask your staff to be furloughed, or is it a decision by your employer?
You can certainly be asked to, but at the end of the day, it is the employer decision. But some of the employers, the rules are changing all the time on this, and it might well be that your employer is just not up to date with the latest rules and regulations that are out there. So it might be worth going back to them to say, look, I joined this webinar, I understand that if I'm working from home, even if you've laid me off, I can be furloughed and you can get the money to pay me for that period of time. It doesn't stop them at the end of that furlough period, if they really wanted to lay you off then, when they stop getting the money from the government. But in the meantime, they're getting the money from the government and you continue to be paid. So it's a bit of a win-win situation for everybody.
Great, thank you. Someone's talking about this £6 tax return per week that you helpfully mentioned. Should we be waiting until we're all back in the office to apply for this, or should we be doing it weekly? Is that a tax return issue?
Yeah, I think for HMRC, like everybody's going to be inundated with bits and pieces. What I would do is wait until everybody's back at work, so you know how many weeks that you're applying for. And you will get, so if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you'll be getting £1.20 back for every week. If you're a high rate taxpayer, you'll be getting £2.40 back for every week. So to make it cost effective for both you and HMRC, I'd wait till the end of the period, but I imagine they'd prefer that too.
Great. We've got some about flights here. Will they only refund flights that are cancelled now? I'm worried about my July, August flights to Spain. Oh yes, I've got some of those too. I'm thinking of cancelling a holiday. I think if you cancel, I don't know. Anyway, you might know. Sorry.
Yeah, if you cancel yourself before the flight is cancelled, then they do not have to give you that refund. So it's well worth waiting. I mean, most airlines will allow you to change flights for a small admin fee. So if you wanted to move the flights to later in the year, but to actually be entitled for the cash refund, they need to have cancelled the flight. So it's worth waiting for that.
Yes, you just have to hold your nerve, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
So someone here said,
go on. I was going to say, I had somebody a friend of mine was due to fly out today and they still haven't cancelled. But if they don't put the flight on, then you'll be entitled to that cash refund. So yeah, hold your nerve, as you say.
Maybe your travel insurance might help. If not, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, someone here said, I've been employed for several years. I've been able to efficiently work from home. I have a 10-year-old. Today I've heard that I'll be furloughed from tomorrow until the end of May. From being furloughed, can my employer then make me redundant? Oh, sorry, I think you actually answered that earlier with someone else, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the reason that they're deciding to furlough you is because you're looking after a child from home. And I know that some employers are worried about the fact that people won't be as productive if they're also having to homeschool and do all of that. So they are entitled to furlough you. But just because you're furloughed, it doesn't change your rights as an employee. You know, just as potentially they could have laid anybody off at the end of the year. They could still do that if you were furloughed. It doesn't change any other rights that you have just because you're furloughed. I hope that answers the question.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Here's an interesting one. Can my employer help with extra working from home costs, e.g. Wi-Fi, etc.?
Yes, that's entirely up to them. They could actually give you an extra £6 per week that isn't taxed. So rather than you claim it back on your tax return, they could just give you £6 extra a week without any tax penalties at all. Obviously, they could go over and above that £6 a week, but then you may be taxed on that as a benefit in kind. But yes, if your employer is willing to do that, they can add it.
Great. And here's one. I've not worked long enough to get statutory redundancy payment. If I was made redundant after my furloughing period, would income protection insurance protect me in this instance? There you go.
It will totally depend on your policy that you have in place and whether it covers redundancy. Every policy is different, so it's really hard for me to answer that without having seen the rules. But potentially, yes, that's exactly what income protection is there for, to protect you if you lose your income. So I'll check your policy, but yes, it could well cover that instance.
Okay, great. And then someone asked, do you have to be tested for COVID-19 and confirmed before you can apply for any benefits surrounding having the illness? I suppose.
You can, the last time I looked, you can what's the word? For 7 days, you can claim benefits for sickness without any certificate from NHS 111. After that, you will need to get a certificate from them. Self-certificate, that's the word I was looking for.
That's great.
But yes,
okay,
if it's
so
really long,
yeah. I think we're getting to the end of our questions. We've had some really positive comments, and someone said it's made finance much clearer. It's the most helpful webinar they've attended. There you go. That's nice, isn't it, Sarah?
Thank you very much.
That was the
aim, because I know there are so many questions at the moment, so I'm just trying to pull together every webinar I'm doing. I'm sort of adding in the questions that people asked last time. So hopefully by the end of it, everybody will be getting the answers they need.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and yeah, and on that note, yeah, so thank you all so much for contributing today and asking all your questions, which have, as Sarah says, have been really, really helpful. You will receive a copy of this webinar as you've experienced it today. So don't worry if you've missed any of the links or whatever. And on that note about feedback, you will get a brief evaluation form in a second. It's really helpful to us if you wouldn't mind just filling it in for any future webinars. And then finally, just to say, the next in the series of the This Can Happen webinars is on the 14th of April, and it's how to sleep well in a changed world. And on that note, thank you again, Sarah, for a really, really great session. Enjoy the rest of your sunny day. I'm now going to end the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everyone.